Hey, this is Misha, Renee, Blackstone Empire. Welcome to our humble studio in Utrecht, right in the middle of the city. Yeah, let's watch this video.
This is a collaboration with State of Mind from New Zealand. They're friends and colleagues. Every time when they tour Europe, they'll be here, sleeping at one of our houses or a friend's house, and we hang out and make music. And they come over so much that we make a lot of tunes together. So we just released a 6-track EP last Friday, and this is one track of it called Thug, and we're gonna explain a bit how we made things.
EP is called The Violent Five,
because
we're 5 very nice people. Who are not violent at all.
Yeah.
So here we go. It was a track that he started back home. So some of the stuff was already bounced down to waveform, but we did add a lot to it. The idea Stu had from State of Mind early on in the track was to have something that was quite empty on the first kick, and then basically had all mayhem start on the second count basically. So on the snare, the bass would drop and everything else would drop. So that's the whole idea of the tune basically, that it's like a bit quiet and then goes on. That's pretty much how it stayed throughout. So we both work in, we all work in Cubase, so that really helps with keeping it all together.
Yeah, it helps also with the workflow because they know what they're doing in the same program. Because if you use different programs, the shortcuts are different, and you delete things without knowing.
All right. So this was part of the initial stuff that Stu had, I think. So as you can see, it's quite empty here on the first count, and then it sort of starts where the snare is, usually on the second count. He had the snare as well. So as you can see, that's pretty much the vibe of the tune, that it was sort of empty at first and then started. So that was pretty much what he had in the beginning. And then we built a lot of stuff around it. And another thing we liked was an old tune called Time Warp by Subfocus. So we kind of wanted to have that vibe of it synth-wise. And another one here. So this is one of our favorite synth actually, called The Surge. And the reason why we use it a lot is because it's very easy to modulate a lot of stuff, but still not really lose yourself. So it's quite easy. You have all the LFOs down here, and you have your oscillators right here, and it's really fairly simple. You have 2 filters, and you can still, even though it's quite an old plugin, you can still do a lot with it. And it's good for mid-range, for melodies, for bass, for everything. And it has FM, and it has classic waveforms, and it has wavetables. So it has really a lot. And these are all surge layers. So I'll play you back the bass when it drops. So as you can see, it's quite, it's just cut up with little edits in between. So here we have something to accentuate basically the first hit. That's just a small little sample, not a lot of processing on it either. Yeah, the bass with this tune was pretty much, a lot of it was done actually. We have some side chaining. Obviously roll down the bass a little bit and enhance the 1K a little bit, 1.6. We limit it a bit.
Yeah, that's what we do quite a lot now. Limit the bass before it goes to the stereo output somehow, because it's quite important to have your sub sitting on the same level, even though it modulates a bit. So you can push it a little bit harder, and then it stays kind of even throughout the whole track.
Yes.
You can make your tunes louder that way as well, because you don't have the big peaks and because sub is quite the thing that takes the most space anyway. So it's a nice little trick. The way we sidechain is, normally it kind of depends, not always the same way. Most is the kick, because the kick and sub, like they're in each other's way anyway. So either we call it as like a ghost kick, so we have a separate channel that doesn't go to the stereo output and just goes to the sidechain. Sometimes it's actually the actual kick, but it kind of depends. Sometimes you run out of cents, so you double it again.
Sometimes the actual kick is quite long,
Yeah.
so when you do sidechaining, it will take the bass out for too long, where you only want the attack or like the middle bit, so you make a ghost kick and it's quite short, so it will only punch out the bass for a little bit, then come back quite quickly.
Yeah, and then we sometimes sidechain on the snare a bit as well, but always a lot less, because there's not a much sub in the snare anyway, so they can hit at the same time.
So with this sound, we basically used one oscillator, and it was an FM sound. There's also comb filtering going on here. So if and there's only one modulator, and the LFO just modulates the amount of FM on the first ratio. The feedback goes up a bit. I mean, this is really a simple envelope, really, because you can use LFOs as envelopes in Surge. So I just gave it a really long attack. As you can see here, it's almost fully open, 16 bars. So it gives you a nice development over a long period of time. The comb filter is something we use a lot. That's right here. We use it, give it a lot of resonance, and a comb filter is not like a normal filter because it has a lot of peaks, so it gives you a lot of harmonics across the whole spectrum. And we set down the cutoff really low, so it accentuates a lot of bass and gives you a lot of resonance there. So this is really a nice trick in combination with FM. FM also has a lot of dynamics across the whole spectrum, unlike a sine which doesn't have any, or like a normal sine, unmodulated one. So this is a way to generate a big sound that gives you a lot of harmonics in the whole spectrum. And again, the filter doesn't even have to modulate. Sometimes we do, but in this case, it was just a matter of quickly doing like some volume going on here. So it drops along as the bars progress, and these amounts go up because they can get quite harsh. So that's why we take the volume down after a bit. And then it's also the wave shaper is giving it a slight soft clipping sound. Again, that's just to make it louder and more interesting in the high frequencies. So this is quite a simple sound actually, that just there's a little bit of processing on there. This is one we use a lot, the trash, and it's just got, I mean, there's so many algorithms you can choose from. In this case it was called Garage, Fuzz Garage, and we usually take the mix down a bit because we want to have a lot of characteristics from the original sound, but just add that bit of distortion, that bit of crunch. So we take down the mix to about 10% or something, 13 in this case. So first up is distortion, then I put some waves H delay on there because it's one of my favorite tools to make everything stereo.
Yeah.
Set the dry wet settings to about 40, 50. Then I take it off the sync actually because it usually will default to the host sync, but I take it to microseconds and take it down really low, like in the 30s, 40s. Give it no feedback, no filter, no analog, just a bit of dry wet and just a bit of
Yeah, maybe you
left-right delay.
you can play it with or without it. It's quite a big difference.
Yes. So that's without. So it's still pretty much the same sound, it just doesn't fill both speakers quite as well without it. So that's a plugin we use a lot, and of course you can also use the standard stereo delay that's in Cubase. I use this a lot too. Just have it on 0 mix on one channel, no filter whatsoever, and just have it on full wet on the other. So it will pan left and right, and one will just be the normal sound, and one will have just about 50 or 40, and then you can play with the mix a little bit, so you have a bit of the original signal and a bit of the delayed signal, and that gives a huge stereo sound. So it's a very easy trick, very easy way of making something stereo, unlike chorus effect or something else. So it's a simple trick. Then we roll off a lot of bass, because obviously it's not a real bass sound, it's proper like mid-range sound. We dip it again here because it's quite a busy mix in that 1K area or 1 point something area. So some sounds need to dip a little bit. And it's also a bit of sidechaining on there. So it just gives that moving feeling along with the kick. And the pitch was actually, normally would be done in a synthesizer, but in this case it was done with the sound shifter, because it gives a bit more of a grainy feeling. And obviously it's also nice to do it after processing, because like it goes through the distortion first and then gets pitch shifted later, so it gets quite crunchy as it goes up.
Yeah, it's just
and
one
it's only the
semitone.
one semitone anyway.
Yeah.
So that's this is something that we put on there to give it slightly more hi-fi feeling, but in this case I don't think it was even necessary. I don't know if you can actually. It makes it slightly more flat, I think, but it worked in this context. And then we roll off some more bass for some reason. So yeah, that's one of the mid-range lead sounds. And a lot of the other ones are variations on that thing. Right, so that was the first sort of inspired by the old Subfocus tune. And let me see what goes on in that one. That's even simpler, because it was reminiscent of that old sound by Subfocus, and it was just not even FM synth, so just really easier, just the classic waveform there, and you have the sawtooth and the square. In this case we chose the square, and that one actually pitches up just in the synth. As you can see here, this modulation turned blue, so that means there's some modulation going on, and it just goes, I don't know how slow this is, again 16 bars I guess, yeah. So over the course of 16 bars it will pitch up, but in this case it will go up to like 12, so full octave, but you don't play the whole note, so it doesn't reach it. But this is one of the simplest sounds really, just a sawtooth that pitches up, and of course the comb filtering does a lot. I can play it back without. Yeah, you can basically hear it in the beginning where it just gives you the comb filter sound, because of the resonance and the frequency way down here. And then obviously there's some reverb on it, quite a lot. It's quite wet. This is a reverb we use a lot because it's just simple, and it's not impulse reverb, but it's just really simple algorithms, and they always work. Again, roll off some bass. Ah, interesting, there's more sound shifter over here. So basically these two do the same thing. And then you have an LFO tool to give it that sort of gate feeling. It's not even synced, so that's interesting. This was done by hand, it's quite brave. And then a bit of, this is a tool that Stu from State of Mind uses a lot, just basically to give it more, to give the sound more beef. He just uses it to gain, and he doesn't actually touch most of the EQ settings. He just likes the algorithm of stuff going in because it's set to analog. just the difference between the sound going in clean and coming out a little bit raw. So that's what he uses a lot for that. And he uses a lot on the bass as well, but that was rendered. So. All right, so that was that sound. Obviously, when you listen to the sounds on their own, they're not going to give you the full experience. But as you can see, we use quite a lot of layers in total.
We like to layer anyway, like with the drums, with everything.
Because, I mean, this was we made a very sort of choppy LFO mid style. So all together, it sounds really big. So if you layer that with that surge sound, that's quite big. And you need both, but yeah, as you can tell, it's really just about having everything together, and it's just. And then this sound that comes in here without the mid-range, it doesn't sound like much, but all together. So really what we do a lot when we do production is basically just create a lot of layers. Sometimes we will have 3 different things making bass, 2 different things doing high end, 2 different things doing mid-range. And we spend a lot of time trying to figure out where everything sits in the mix. And yeah, and if we just start at the beginning of the track, we have some melodies going on. So this was just a simple thing that we played in Serum, another synth that we use quite a bit. But the interesting thing on there was the loop mesh effect, which we hadn't actually used before, but it's quite cool because it gives you sort of a glitchy effect. But this is another thing that's just built in, and we just messed around with it live and then recorded it, and then used parts of the waveform of the recording. We found that was better than to use it actually live. So this is something we did for the intro. What we use for drums quite a lot is these libraries, like XLN do a library and BFT do a library. Superior Drummer is another one. I don't know which one we used for this one, Superior Drummer. So this is a library that we used, but we only needed it for an intro. So we didn't want to have a normal straight drum sound. We wanted to have a bit of an effect on there. And I'll show you what we did in a sec. This is basically the thing. And again, it's just really not a lot of sound shaping going on, just a bit of clipping. And we take off the bass and take off the highs a little bit here. Again, do the same thing here, sort of band pass filter here. A little bit of distortion, but it didn't really matter because the main thing, so this is pretty much a simple sort of intro beat. But the interesting thing that goes on here is it goes into the absinthe, and again there's this is just the audio going in, and this is the comb filter. And what we did was put a comb filter on the beat, so it sounds sort of like a synthesizer, but you don't really know what you're hearing because your ears. Comb filtering is kind of an unnatural filter that doesn't sort of represent anything in the real world. It's kind of weird sounding. So with this, I don't know if I need to turn it up a little bit.
Yeah, it makes the beat sound like something totally different, you know?
So as you can see, we just automated the resonance and the frequency, and the change is quite small, so you cannot probably see it, but it just automates over these 16 bars and then just ends up being on the top here and the highest part here, just right before the drop. And it just gives you a feeling of sort of what's going on. It's like a sort of mysterious in the beginning, along with that little arpeggio thing that goes on. So let me play it to you with that little, because the intro is basically all about. And then this is the one that doesn't have the effect on it, so this is just basically the clean break.
entertaining. It's good.
Yeah, so that was that little intro thing.
Yeah, this whole tune gets a lot of energy from everything is pitching a bit up or either up or down or strangely with a comb filter. So
Yeah,
yeah, the modulation in that makes it keeps it interesting. Like that the modulation actually makes the tune. Like the bass itself is pretty simple, but pitching
yeah, and
it.
also because of the comb filtering, you're not actually hitting any notes or any specific frequency, so your ears are kind of like, what is this? Is this a melody or it's kind of weird? That's an interesting thing.
Yeah, is it pitching down or what is it doing? Or pitching up?
Yeah. Basically, that was just how we got the name for the track, a thing called Thug. I don't remember what it was from, like maybe an old mafia movie or something.
It was you. No,
no, it was not. So there's some distortion on there to make it sound a little bit more menacing. Obviously, it's pitched down, so that will add some distortion. Just it being an old sample and pitching it down will give you that distortion effect already. And we just created several layers of it. This is Bionic Delay is a free delay that we've used probably since we began in the 90s or something.
it's great.
It's great. It still does the same thing as the old thing we used in Logic when we started. So this is a great plugin. Gets used a lot. Yeah, there's the good old H delay to make it a bit more stereo. The old trick we did on the other one, and it's the same thing on the other version of it, the other layer. And this one has a host synced delay as well, because it's such a tiny little sample. It needs to be sort of a bit longer and build up in intensity. Yeah, so it was quite difficult because we Blackson Empire usually create drums that are full just all the way through. So it was quite we had to restrain ourselves a little bit because of the feel of this track. It still was very specific, and we also liked the fact that it was sort of quiet and then picked up. So the whole vibe of the whole drum tune is the drum folder is basically like that. We had to put everything we had to quiet everything on the first kick, and then everything will build up in intensity.
And put the accent on the snare when the bass is, there's like this reversed open hi-hat that actually sucks you into the snare.
Because normally you would, in a normal Blackson Empire tune, this would definitely be on the one, like a big splashy sound, sort of creates a huge space. But yeah, even that was not on the one, it was just on the snare. All the accents are basically on the snare and then just goes from there.
Yeah, and then this one, the reverse thing just before it, that actually makes you, really the reverse hat that really sucks you into that first hit.
Yeah. So that's on the kick, on the first, on the one. Yeah. Yes.
And then it gives that energy.
I don't think there's a lot of processing on the drum since we rendered so many things here. Again, there's some only delay later on, I guess.
Do we use New York compression here?
Nope.
Nope.
This is all the side chaining.
No, and we used to be really like MIDI based, like have battery or to do the drums, but slowly we started bouncing out a lot more. Like also this track, I don't know, it's like 90 channels or something. And with drums, when it's still MIDI, it's sometimes harder to edit stuff. So like reverse, or it's nicer to have like audio. You can do strange thing with it. So a lot of our drums nowadays are audio because you can do weirder things real quick. Well, otherwise, and that new feature like render in place is also amazing. You just
awesome.
Bass edits, just bounce it out, and then
and it just becomes more visual. Like if you have a lot of MIDI going on, you can obviously see the notes, but you don't know what the notes represent. So it could be like a really short sample or like super long. And if you render it out to audio, you can see where the problems are already. Like you can see here, you can see the kick, and if you would have another kick on another channel, you can see that there's overlay, and it would be too much on the same place. So quite visual to see your stuff on the screen and to see if there's overlap and stuff like that. And you can just, just do lots of edits here and make it shorter, longer, obviously, and pitch shift and stuff like that. Reverse.
Yeah, sometimes it's easier to, if you want the release and your gig to be a little bit less, it's easier to do it in audio than to actually do it in a sampler, because then you're just struggling, or you can't really see how long it is. Well, this is really visual. Yeah, you can actually see how long it is.
But you need both, because the sampling phase is really important when you're going through your sounds.
Yeah.
We use Media Bay, but within Native Instruments, Battery or Contact, it's quite easy to go through everything quickly and just auditions, snares and kicks and stuff like that. So it's in the process of making it, it's quite important, but later on we just render everything out.
Yeah.
So this is a standard thing in drum and bass, where you go from build up or breakdown to drop again. What we usually do with State of Mind is they'll have a huge vinyl collection. So they went through all their vinyl collection at some point and just recorded a lot of breaks from it. A lot of people doing little drum rolls, tom rolls mostly, and so we'll just go through them and just take little snippets and just loop them, put them on the screen, just make them build up in intensity, put like some flanger on there or a filter, and yeah, that's just really it. It just builds up in intensity and people know when to expect the drop. So,
what kind of filter is on there?
So especially towards the end there, that's a very typical sort of State of Mind influence. Let me see if there's something interesting in there. Yeah, so like I said, this is a bit of I don't know if it's a flanger or yeah. Anyway, it just gives you that sort of classic, the Pioneer mixer when you're DJing. When you press that flanger, it just sort of gives you that feeling. So a DJ doesn't have to. And obviously it's very bandpassed, because you only need like the mid-range of it. And again, this is just the same trick to make it more stereo, the H delay on there. And just a bit of tape saturation, which is also a very, very good algorithm, because it doesn't distort a lot. It just gives you a bit of high frequency harmonics, so it will just stand out more in the mix. And there's added limiter, of course, in there.
And this Nox is the filter?
Yep. No, that's just a bit crusher that goes from no bit crushing to messed up. Yeah, so that's a lot of detail in just one tiny little thing, because it's very important to have it in the build-up, I think. So this is the bit in the tune where things get a bit more steppy, a little bit of a different vibe. Just gets a little bit more of a four to the floor feeling. And as usual, like when we have the drop sorted, we need some more edits and stuff to make it more interesting towards the final or the later 16 bars or 32 bars. And in this case, it's another surge for mid-range. Again, frequency modulation, and it just has one LFO and one LFO that controls the filter. This is just a normal low-pass filter, because it's more of a normal bass sound. And a lot of distortion already in the plugin, and it's set to hard, so it's quite messed up by the time it leaves the surge. And then there's some
more distortion.
This time a multi-band distortion with nothing going on in the bass, because we probably rolled that off later. And there's some saturation on here and some harmonics. And another nice trick we do a lot is when we make mid-range stuff, is to actually increase the distortion in the mid-range in the beginning, but then take it down again. So the distortion in sort of this area will affect the bass and the high end considerably, but then when you take it off, you only get sort of the artifacts of the high and the low end. So this is a great a great EQ for getting rid of the mid-range, which is weird for a mid-range sound, but that's what you do a lot. You just make it really loud and then take it back again, so you get that sort of artificial, weird sound. And again, some H delay for stereo purposes, and then some camel fat, which also gets a lot of use.
Yeah, great distortion and filters on that.
Yep.
We use it a lot.
And yeah, just simple, just does a little bit of tube distortion, a little bit of Mac distortion, and it because it's a 16-bit plugin, I think it will just never allow it to be very dynamic, so it will just clip it at 16-bit, which means it won't go up in the mixer, and it will just be very sort of controlled sounding. So it's a good way of doing that. So yeah, that's one of those steps where you can spend hours on it in every detail, and then when it's in the tune, it's actually only in there like 3 times or something. But you need that attention to detail, I think.
Yeah, can you solo it? Just to see how it sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, it's also nice to just save stuff like that, because it's quite an interesting sound when you use it longer or higher as well. So we just save the track preset, and you know, call it up whenever we need it again.
Yeah, that's a great new feature that you can just save channel and then use it again later in a different way, of course.
Yep.
Don't want to keep reusing everything, because then everything starts to sound the same. But
yeah, but like you might create it for a mid-range and then use it later on as like a high sound or a bass sound, so it gets different uses anyway.
yeah, and sometimes even the channel strip, like load in a great sounding mid-range distortion thing and just changing the sound, and then you'll create
effects, but you'll change the
it will create
sound,
something that you won't do normally yourself, because it was made for a bass sound or a mid-range. And if you put it on the synth side, sometimes it's great, like a lead sound or so. Yeah, be creative that way. Lazy but creative. Make techno as well sometimes, but saving track presets from like other genres and using them again into drum and bass, or the other way around, is makes your drum and bass or your techno sound different, because you'll start using sounds that you normally wouldn't really think would fit. Or it's great. And also when you go to someone's house and they have Cubase themselves, we had Neon Light over a month ago. They just bring saved channels and they'll bring their bass sounds. You can just load them in. This is great.
Yeah, so that's really the only sound that's really live. The rest is just a lot of bounced versions of it. Yeah, because like all these things are really important as well, like the end of bar, sort of weird mid steps. But that one is also a rendered version, so it's kind of hard to say anything about it. Just that you need a lot of sounds like that. Moving back to the drum bus, there was a little cowbell sound that we changed up a bit. So this is our main thing for drums in the beginning. I mean, when we're setting up the track or building the track, we just use battery all the time on every channel, because it's so easy to just go through, to use the browser or just go through the next previous buttons here and just audition all these sounds. So in this case, we just use little 2 versions of it, just being, one is just tuned up one, and it's just a simple cowbell, I think. So it doesn't really sound like much, but with all the
yeah, that
the
free
reverb
plugging is
and
quite nice actually, to make everything sound real stereo. Yeah.
Yeah, it just delays. I guess it does the same thing, right? Delay just one channel and then just generate a lot of stereo with bit of delay on there. That doesn't do much for the stereo. Obviously you don't need any bass in a sound like this, and a little bit more high. Bit of glue. This is one of our favorite compressors actually. Use it all the time. Yeah, it's just nothing really that special, but it just is a great way for making a track come out in the mix. Just fairly simple one, and then just a a lot of Vala reverb.
You see, we use quite a lot of the same plugins on every channel.
They're just our favorite plugins. So yeah.
You slowly keep going to the same ones. It's funny.
Yeah. So yeah, that's.
Maybe we can explain what's on the master. Is there a lot on the master? We like to actually master the tunes ourselves. Like what comes out of Cubase here is what we release. Yeah, we've done that for a long time, and now that vinyl is less important sometimes, like you do used to, your bass should always be mono, because otherwise the needle would jump off. But now that everybody uses CDJs, you can actually start experimenting with having more reverb on the sub, even though your stereo might not like it. But no.
So there's, the trick for us to have sort of the same sound on an EP, because that's what you basically need mastering for, to have different tracks that sound slightly different and sort of the same. But the trick for us is to not use it that much on the mastering channel, because if you have a lot on the mastering channel, it tends to make a certain sound for a track, so you can easily create a certain atmosphere for it. But it's quite a lot better to just have it on quite neutral, just a bit of limiting, a bit of harmonic, like there's a bit of isotope in here that just generates a bit of harmonics, and this one does a little bit for the stereo width, only just on the high frequencies.
And as you can see, we have noise.
There's a bit of noise going in, but yeah, not too much of an issue. And then we do roll off in this one. We do roll off the stereo information in the sub, because
you can just only take the stereo information of the sub out, where you can.
So this will just be just mono down here, all the sub frequencies, and then we use this built-in Cubase just to deliver it to 16-bit. Yeah, that's about it. So there's nothing that much in the sense of EQs or something. Just very, very clean.
Yeah.
Because it's better when you have a problem with your mix. It's better to actually fix the sounds, or like the bass bus or the drum bus, than to try and do it in a master channel, because you will just have too much going on and it's too hard to compensate. So, yeah, master channel is just very clean, just limiting and dithering.
Oh yeah, maybe the Magic AB thing is quite nice. We use like a separate output on which we always have this plugin called Magic AB. You can load in 9 tunes of your favorite tunes that you think sound great, and then easily switch between A/B. But it saves every tune you like. You can always have your favorite reference tracks in there and really easily switch. And also, if you are doing an EP, load up the rest of your tunes and you can just A/B real quick between. Yeah. Do they sound the same? Are they the same
basically
level?
Like mastering.
Yeah, which is great. And then we have that thing that actually shows you
the loudness of it.
Maybe you can drag it to this. Yeah, it just shows you how loud it is over a certain period. Yeah, and then we always have span, like a spectrum analyzer. That's probably my favorite plugin, because when you run,
it's quite nice to sort of not make a straight line, but if you have a good tune, it will it tends to be a little bit straight. And if you have certain sounds that sort of peak loudly but sound interesting, but you still know, okay, that's where you have some weird peaks, and in the club that might be too loud or something. So it's very good to have sort of a straight line around minus 20, 34 and minus 30.
Yeah, it really shows you how loud your sub is. Sometimes, because this is not an ideal studio space, but you can see what's going on and not only trust your ears. It's just great.
Yeah.
And we're going deaf slowly, so mixing down on the spectrum analyzer. Yeah.
All right, so that's the end of that, and we'll see you back in part 2.